I think it's safe to say that we have one of the best dressed editors in the industry, James Wilcox, AC, here on the Hollywood Editing Mentor podcast. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Joaquin. Thank you for having me.
I've been wanting to talk to you now for a while for many, many reasons. First of all, we both worked under Monty the Graph, and I used to hear your name all the time working with Monty. James this, James that. So I'm like, I got to talk to James. And I also heard that your career started in news, just like myself. And definitely want to talk to you about that, but just happy that you are here today.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny. I didn't know, by the way, before we even launch in and talk about Monty, who's just like family. He's amazing and has done so much to help me get my career off the ground. And I still talk to him constantly as a friend, just like a family member. Honestly, we've become super, super close, known each other well for well over 20 years now. He's just the best, really. But I did not know that you started your career in news as well.
Yeah, my first job out of college was as a videographer / editor in local news in San Diego.
Okay. Yeah, it's amazing how that experience has molded itself and helped me so much going forward. Because one of the things that I always talk to people about the craft of editing is you really need to be cutting every day. You need to be doing something every day. And, working in news, the stories are always changing. The issues are different. The topics come in hot and you cannot miss your slot. So you get a certain sort of battleground training and testing that really helps the ability to work under pressure, I think. And so now to these days, when I'm working with producers or I'm on a fast deadline or a quick turnaround or whatever, I always reflect back slightly on those days because I think that was a bit of the foundation that's helped me become fast and creative and to be accurate in my storytelling.
Oh yeah, well, we talk about being faster. I mean, how many times I remember, and I'm sure you can relate, I was running down the hallway with the tape, DVC Pro tape, into the control room to deliver my news story to make the deadline. But I learned so much, to work under pressure. I mean, it was crazy. And just working in live TV in general.
Yeah, it's been so much change from those days to now. And even now when I'm remote editing with a director or a producer or whomever, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the spot. And I'm very comfortable working under that pressure and being able to deliver what it is we need to do. If I need to dig back into dailies and we're reworking a certain story beat or point or whatever, it's become very, very valuable skill. And, that's one of the things that when you're on the other side of it, kind of looking down that tunnel and a straight path, trying to figure out where your career is going, which is never a straight path. We all know that now. It's those curves that really take us into new experiences. And it's really wonderful if you embrace that. And that work does pay itself going forward.
Absolutely. Well, talking about path, take us back now. So when you started in news and what your path was like then to getting, first of all, to working in scripted TV and then feature films.
Okay, well, I'll give you the briefest explanation of this long journey that I can. So I started in news as an intern. Actually, I went to college at which is now Clark College or Clark Atlanta University. At the time, it was Clark College. And I got my very first internship, one at CNN, and then later a paying one at the local CBS affiliate. And those guys really mentored and trained me. Because Georgia is a right to work state, so they didn't have a union. So they really relied a lot on the editors or the interns rather, as editors. So once they trained me, I started off cutting small packages of highlights in the sports department and eventually outgrew that. The head editor for the newsroom, he came to me one day and said, when you get out of school, we'd like to bring you on full time, but in news. And I thought, well, sports is kind of my thing. I would love to stick with this. But he goes, you know what, James, every time we run long on a newscast, what gets cut first? Sports and then weather. So that's just saying you might be doing some wonderful work that'll never make it on the air. So I thought about it, easy decision to make, went over into the news department, quickly found that the skills that I acquired and with my personality and the ability to work under pressure and all the things that I embraced about news editing really worked well. And I was more comfortable than I thought. And I quickly ascended to the ranks of, within like a year and a half, which is unbelievable to think about that, one of the top editors in that group. It was just a natural fit for me. I didn't know that I was actually going to become the editor that I've ultimately become, but it was really interesting. So I did that, and then I got out of that place and went back east and started bouncing around doing a lot of other jobs, continued doing news, working at some production houses, gathering more experience. And the news director from Atlanta, that station in Atlanta, when I left, he promised we would stay in touch. We did. He called me. It was in around this time of year, actually, in a blizzard. I was back in New York working, and he said, "Look, I'm news director at KCBS, or at the time was KNX, KNXT rather." And he came out and he said, "We have an opening for an editor. We're going to bring you out, put you up in a hotel, you interview for the job, and let's kind of give it a shot and see if this is a good fit for both of us, because we could use your skills, and I want you to come on out and check it out." I had never been to the West Coast before, let alone Los Angeles. I came out. Man, the city was just overwhelmingly beautiful. The weather was in stark contrast to what I was dealing with back east, where it was like 13 inches of snow. And out here, I think it was like probably a 65, 70-degree day. I had one college buddy who was out here, took me around LA after my interview. And he took me over on the Pacific Coast Highway, and we came through that tunnel, and it was around sunset, and my mind was blown.
You knew how to sell it. You knew how to sell it.
Oh my God. I was like, you know what? I don't know what the offer is going to be, but I'm taking it. Whatever it is, if it's the same money, whatever, I'm in, because this is just the place. And then I did get the offer, took the job, worked at CBS for 9 years, became the supervising editor while I was there. But I could see in the last 3 years of it, I was doing a lot of travel as well and remote editing on the spot as well, live television. But I could see within the last 3 years, the technology was changing. We were working tape to tape. And at that time, I thought, ooh, what's next? And it became nonlinear editing. And so I went and took a class at USC for the Avid, and got that, and then started planning my departure out of news. And I was supervising editor, the youngest one who had ever had that position. And my peers thought, "You're crazy. You're like sitting on top of the kingdom. Why would you even go anywhere else for this unknown opportunity?" And I just thought, you know what? This technology is going to revolutionize our industry. And it did, and it has. And so I left and went on to get myself on a show for Fox. It was like a news magazine show, which was a perfect transition in terms of the material. And they hired like 10, 12 other editors, and none of us really knew the Avid very well. There was one guy who knew the Avid better than all of the rest of us. So he became the go-to. And we did that for a while. And interesting enough, on that show, I met a couple of people that have gone on to do feature films and stuff. There's one guy, Dan Minahan, who's now a director, and Mary Herron, and she's also a director, and she's gone on to do other things. And a lot of people just scattered into the industry doing all kinds of stuff. So anyway, I took that experience, and along the way is where I met Monty DeGraff. And we met each other at a mutual friend's Christmas party. And he would ask me what I'm up to, and I tell him what I'm up to. And I told him, I think the next step in my career, I'd like to gain some experience and really go into the episodic realm. And so, we talked about that over several Christmases, over several years. And eventually I was working at MTV doing a lot of music editing, and that helped me a whole lot, helps me to this day. If I'm on a show or a feature that doesn't have a music editor, or the music editor comes on late, I'm very comfortable with cutting my own music. And eventually in 1999, I got hired by Monty to work on Soul Food. And that was my first episodic show. And it was a wonderful opportunity. John Rafua was on the show, who's, gone on to cut so many huge features, including, Avatar, The Way of the Water. He was on the first one with Steve Rifkin and everything. And so after that first season, the show, which was shot in Toronto, decided that they were going to move all production up to Toronto, post everything. So I had one great year of all this lead in of trying to get into the union, A, get on a job, B, find something that sort of fit my skill set. And finally, that opportunity happened with Soul Food. And then I was out of a job in like pretty much 11 months. But luckily, I had done so well there that John Rafua was watching my work and monitoring it and helping me in the whole thing. He went over to James Cameron's show, Dark Angel, and they had an opening there. He put my name in a hat, went over, interviewed, got hired. And I found myself after having that opportunity at Soul Food, suddenly now I'm working shoulder to shoulder with James Cameron. And I did that for 2 years. And he never gave me any kind of notes on my drama cutting, rarely on anything on action. So I felt like a blessed guy, a made man working under him and learning his philosophy of how he stages action, how he wants to see it cut, the whole thing. There's a lot of different styles that directors employ for their approach to action and storytelling, but he specifically likes most of his action to unfold in the frame rather than a blizzard of cuts, which are sometimes cheats. I see certain action sequences and I go, I don't know what's going on there, but it went by pretty fast.
Yeah. It's moving along. All right, I guess.
It's moving. I don't know what I just saw, but it's moving. And so he taught me that philosophy and I just held on to that. And then that show ended and I got a call to go over and work in comedy. And that call came from Damon Wayans' camp for my wife and kids. And I worked over there for 3 seasons. By the time I left, Damon and I had become such good friends. I cut a feature for him, which sadly didn't ever get released. It was really, really great. And I don't know why it didn't get released to this day. I can't give you like a straightforward answer on that, but it didn't. But by the time I left my wife and kids, I was in the DGA. I was directing episodes of My Wife and Kids. And then that show ended as these things happen. It's all cyclical work. None of these shows last forever. So if you can get on something that's a hit show and it lasts for, let's say, I don't know, 3 seasons, you're golden. 5, amazing. If it lasts a decade, it's almost like worthy of being in the Academy television. You know, it's part of television history. So I did that. When that show ended, I had the opportunity to cut the pilot for Reno 911. That went on to be a successful show. Then Everybody Hates Chris was looking for a second editor. And I went over and cut with those guys. And after 1 year, I left that, had a big offer to go to CSI Miami, which was too good to turn down. And I went there and worked there for the next 6 seasons. And from there, I also continued to direct. And after that show ended, I did Hawaii Five-0, some other shows. I left Hawaii Five-0. But the big pivotal show that I think changed my career trajectory, all of them were very, very important, but it was going over to cut on Roots, the 2016 version of Roots. And I got the chance to work with Mario Van Peebles. And that was more cinematic. They basically hired 4 feature film directors and said, you guys, each one of your films will represent 4 nights of this storytelling across decades of the story itself. And so I got the chance to work with him, and that was for A&E History Channel. So it was away from sort of the hit-making network shows, and that helped tremendously. And then from there, I got a call. Eventually, I got a call to work on Genius. And that's where I met Ron. I did several other jobs in between leaving Roots and going over to Genius. And a couple of the guys that helped me with that I knew that I had met on Roots, Marty Nicholson, shout out to Marty. He really has been a great friend and he's a fabulous editor. And he put me in contact with a show that then I met Stephen Lang on, and shout out to him as well. And he's the one who helped me get over to Nat Geo with Fox, because they wanted him. They wanted a whole bunch of different big name people. And for some reason or another, it didn't really work out. I'd say bigger names than mine. And for some reason, it didn't work out. And I think I was meant to be the guy. I go in, interview, Dan Hanley's there, who is one of Ron's 2 longtime editors. I talked to him. I talked to another executive from Imagine Entertainment. And oddly enough, the showrunner was someone that I had worked with when I was on Dark Angel with James Cameron. So we all had somewhat of a connection there that felt more personal than a really, really formal interview with no real interpersonal connection to it. So they hired me on that. And we were just about to start. It was around Labor Day. And Dan called me and he felt like he was ready to retire. You know, he retired because they were coming off, he and Ron were coming off of In the Heart of the Sea. And no, it was Inferno. Mike Hill retired after In the Heart of the Sea. And Dan had just finished up Inferno with Ron. Now, Ron shoots a lot of material. Some would say overshooting. But here's the value in that. When you go in and you want a replumb story, or bring different characters forward, or have these moments of humanity, certain unexpected things that happen, it's all there because he shoots for the edit. And he's a really good storyteller as an editor as well. He knows exactly what's going to cut together. And at the same time, for me now, since we've worked together on three major projects, he there's room for me to do my thing as well. So it's kind of like a best idea wins kind of situation. And that's where I met Ron, was on Genius. And he was shooting in Prague. I was cutting in Hollywood, at Hollywood Center Stages. And I started sending him cuts. And he was like, James, these cuts are fantastic. With minimal notes, he would send back. And when he came back in from shooting over in Europe, we met formally and we just hit it off. It was like two people who had known each other for years. And he saw how fast I was, the choices I was making. He was really impressed by my performance choices. So that's kind of how we met, and where the relationship with Ron Howard began. And I'll tell you this before I, just talk about the end of that whole thing. I think it was, I took acting at Beverly Hills Playhouse for 3 years because along the way, I wasn't convinced that I understood actors and their choices and how to build performances, rather than looking at the material and going, okay, they didn't flub there. That feels good. Just cut that in. No, all actors need, that's why we're here. That's why we have the craft of editing. We have to tell that story and with their arcs and with the overall story. And so, I think it benefited me tremendously because I was able to see the actor's intentions and knew how to build those characters out. And he was really, really impressed with that because he works with A-list actors. And so if you don't know what you're doing, it'll expose itself pretty quickly. I've got the opportunity with him to work now with Jeffrey Rush, Emily Watson, Glenn Close, Amy Adams, coming off of 13 Lives, Colin Farrell, Viggo Mortensen, Joel Edgerton, Tom Bateman, and the like. So those are all very well in high demand A-list actors. And look at the year that Colin's had.